Hey people, voice talking to you, and today we're checking out the demo for Endzone 2, a post-apocalyptic survival city builder strategy game, and obviously the sequel to Endzone. Since this game is slated to release pretty soon, I figured I'd give it a spin and see how it measures up. Of course, if you'd like to check this demo out for yourself, I'll have a link for you down in the description where you can try it for free. You'll also find a link down there to my Twitch channel in case you'd like to see live playthroughs of the games on this channel. Now, quick disclaimer before we begin, I have not played the first game or any of its mini DLCs, so if you're looking for comparisons between Endzone and its sequel, I won't be able to help you. However, I am very familiar with the concept behind the first game, as it was a bit of an underground hit, but fans seem to feel it was a bit unfinished. Endzone 2 doesn't give us any kind of world building or help us with the setting at all, so we can assume that the events of the game take place after some kind of nuclear apocalypse, judging by the ruins and radiation mechanics, but aside from that, we're left to speculate. In fact, Endzone 2 doesn't seem to have a set story of any kind, so don't expect named characters or any sort of narrative aside from your own actions. Endzone is a title that keeps players interested through harsh survival and deep strategy mechanics rather than world building and story. When we begin, we're given a modified truck of some kind full of settlers and supplies and directed towards a habitable location amidst the radioactive wastes. My assumption is that these areas are habitable because they're above the radiation, since they're all surrounded by mountains. The main goal of the game is to keep your citizens alive, healthy, and happy, in that order. For the first, you'll need food and water. Food can be gathered from forested areas by placing gatherer huts, or water sources by placing fisheries. Water can of course be collected from lakes with a jetty or pumped more slowly from a marsh using a well. Despite the apparent abundance of food and water, things can get a little tight when a drought hits, which is a remarkably common occurrence.
A draft has come. A draft has come. We ought to prepare ourselves for a draft.
Would you stop with that? Stop. Stop. Droughts are one of the random events that can throw a wrench into your supply lines and wreak havoc on your settlement. During a drought, lakes will dry up, farms will stop producing, and the only food and water will come from gatherers and wells, so stocking up ahead of time is vital. Of course, you'll also need materials like wood, scrap, bricks, and cloth if you're going to rebuild society. Things like wood and clay can be collected from forests and deposits by constructing harvesters, while scrap is pretty much only collected from ruins either with a scrapyard or while you're out exploring the Wasteland. You'll also need to keep your citizens happy and healthy though. If you don't, citizens could get sick, die, or do things like steal from your supplies. Community health can be managed by producing vaccine at a pharmacy and distributing it to homes in its radius. Markets will spend extra food to increase the happiness of citizens whose homes are within its radius. Lastly, you'll need to maintain a steady supply of protective equipment to keep your people safe from rising radiation levels brought on by events like toxic rain. Endzone 2 is all about supply lines and building radiuses. For example, a charcoal kiln will produce faster when near a woodcutter, which can supply it with wood, and even faster when connected to a road and when a supply depot is nearby. Production can be further increased by placing homes of the same building type, economic, ecological, or social, near production centers of that type. It's not all about the benefits though, and you won't always be able to set up supply chains the way you want to when you have to account for certain terrain types and the presence of resources. Buildings can also interfere with each other. For example, a home placed next to a factory might improve production, but the inhabitants will be rather unhappy due to the constant smell. Additionally, placing two fishing docks right next to each other will severely hinder their productivity, as they're sharing the same fishing area. Considering how best to set up your settlement to create effective supply lines, distribution centers, and roadways is half of the strategy of the game. That said, the tutorial doesn't even make mention of roads until you've already built most of your production centers, and the road has to be directly connected to the town center, so connecting a factory to its supply center by road does nothing. The other half of the strategy behind managing your settlement is allocating manpower. You'll always need free workers to build, and though settlers will have children if there are free lodgings, you'll need to be cautious not to overcommit to one mode of production and leave it without materials. The more factories you build, the more base resources you'll need to supply them, and the more workers you'll need to keep it all running, which means more medicine, more food, etc. It's a constantly growing and changing situation, but at medium population levels I never really found it hard to balance these supply chains. I was actually pretty surprised at how simple it was to create a functioning society with excess resources. Also, the lack of any external threats like bandits, the whole scenario didn't really feel like the apocalypse, and the radiation and ruins became more of a set dressing than anything else. That said, if you're looking for a pretty chill colony management sim, this one has a pretty solid gameplay loop overall, and offers lots of room for expansion and the ability to extend your reach to other safe zones and found new settlements. With that, you can establish supply lines and infrastructure between these zones that allow for specialization in what resources are available to each. Now, advancement in Endzone 2 is a bit odd, so bear with me. You won't be researching new buildings. Instead, to unlock a new structure of one type, you have to first build a certain number of buildings from that category. This doesn't really serve as any kind of barrier though, since the player can literally just stack houses of whatever category they need. Once you've built enough buildings, you then need a technology point to make it usable. Technology points are acquired by sending your vehicles out on expeditions. Now, an expedition is different from simply looting a ruin. Your vehicles can scoop up whatever is in a ruin from nearby, but the driver will have to actually get out and explore on an expedition. All things considered, these expeditions are pretty boring and really just serve to slow down the gameplay. As far as I can tell, there's no real threat to you on an expedition. You just have your little character walk around and loot things manually in a really slow and kind of unfocused manner. There's a couple of super simple puzzles, usually consisting of turning on a generator before using some device, and some containers need tools to open, but you can usually earn the research points for a location simply by looting shelves. Aside from unlocking new buildings, I never really saw a reason to go out scavenging. The stuff you found you could usually make back at your base much more quickly, and any advanced materials you found you won't need until you can make them yourself anyways. There's also no risk or cost to sending your vehicles out unless they're carrying settlers from one place to another, in which case they need water, but there's no indicator telling you how much they consume, so you just kind of have to guess at how much they'll need. The ability to manage multiple bases and set up supply lines was a big draw for me initially, but by the time you can build a second settlement, droughts are already a regular occurrence, and that'll pretty much kill that second town unless you've got lots to spare from your main base. Also, the supply line system didn't seem to function properly, and though I assigned my vehicle to that line, it was either transferring the supplies without visibly moving, or it wasn't working at all. Unfortunately, that's not the end of the jank either. Cemeteries don't tell you how many graves are filled and how many are left, there's no building model variety, and the designs overall are quite similar, making the whole landscape pretty boring. The music is really nice, but it's a bit loud and almost constant. There were lots of typos in the dialogue script too, and this normally wouldn't be a big deal, but this game has AI voices reading all of its dialogue, so it makes it extremely hard to ignore.
We ought to prepare ourselves for a draft.
Now, from a purely graphical perspective, Endzone 2 does a decent job with the little details, even if it lacks variety. The foliage and building models look realistic, and they have little animations like cranes and smokestacks to indicate they're functioning. Plus, you can watch your little workers doing their jobs near certain production centers. Overall, I just didn't feel any sort of hook with this game. I spent a lot of time waiting around, and the only real hands-on point, aside from building of course, were shutting off water and food consumption during droughts, shuffling around workers, and expeditions that I could have been fine without. Okay, this is like aggressively slowing things down. At the end of the day, Endzone 2, though mechanically decent, felt uninspired, uninteresting, and just kind of bland. Among the sea of hundreds of other apocalyptic city builders, this title unfortunately fails to stand out. Even putting aside the quality of life issues and overall jankiness, the game just kind of falls flat. Now, solely as a colony sim with an emphasis on supply management, Endzone 2 could be a solid game for you if you're really into that kind of city planning, assuming the devs fix the supply line issues. But for me personally, I was satisfied with just a couple hours I spent in the demo, and after establishing my first settlement, I didn't really feel any sort of hook that makes me want to build another one. Especially when the evolution of the gameplay is just increased demand. Please, let me just finish the demo. I want it to end. But I'm just the voice in your head, so let me know what you think about Endzone 2. Did you play the first game? Does this seem better or worse? Let's talk about it down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, leaving a like really helps me out, and a subscription is, of course, the best way to see more videos like this. Thanks again for listening to me today, and you'll be hearing from me again real soon.